Today what we're going to be talking about is measuring and how to properly measure and also about different cooking utensils. My name is Mrs. Langmeyer, and so welcome to cooking, and today we're going to be making a cookie recipe. As I'm making the cookie recipe, we're going to talk about measurements and how you properly measure. If we lived in another country, if we weren't in the United States, this would be how you would measure your ingredients. You would literally have a scale, and you would put a piece of light paper on it, and you would measure your flour based on grams, and everything has to be measured out. We don't do that in the United States. In the United States, we use cups and teaspoons so that we can get the proper measurement. Actually, this is a more accurate measurement, but that oftentimes is harder for people, so we use a cup method. So when you're measuring things, we've got two different kinds of measuring cup styles. It's very important that you use the proper one, that you don't use the wrong one, because if you use the wrong one, you'll get a product that is going to be either too dry or too moist. The first type is a liquid measuring cup. This is a liquid measuring cup made out of glass, and you can see it's got lines on it. On the one side is for the European or other countries who do use the metric system and have the liters. Okay? Most Americans don't have the liter method down. So on the other side, we have the cups. There are lines for every fourth a cup, a half a cup, 3/4 a cup, and 1 cup. You'll notice the line stops here. There still is a good amount of glass above that. The reason why it doesn't go all the way to the top is because since we've got a liquid in here, it's going to slosh around, and you could spill it. So it gives you extra room, so if you do have to walk it across the room, in your kitchen, that it won't slop. So this is purely for liquids and liquids only. Some of the liquids you might use when you're cooking are milk, water, oil, and things of the like that are more fluid. Vegetable oil that is fluid also oftentimes uses this. This is only for liquids. The opposite of that is the measuring cups. They come in metal or plastic. The standard measuring cup set comes with 1/4, 1/3, 1/2, and 1 cup measurements. There are some measuring cup sets that will have 2/3 and 3/4 of a cup, but that's not the standard. So you will have to use math, kitchen math. So if you have a 3/4 cup it calls for, and you don't have a 3/4 cup measuring cup, you will have to remember that 1/2 cup and 1/4 cup equals 3/4 of a cup. Okay? If you need 2/3 of a cup, you would simply just take 1/3 and measure it 2 times. So you might have to do a little bit of math if you have just the 4 cup standard set. The other method of measurement is when you have just small amounts that you need. Things like salt or pepper or baking soda. Things that would be way too much if you put in 1/4 of a cup. And we use the measuring spoons. The standard measuring spoon set is 1/4 of a teaspoon, and teaspoon on your recipe card is denoted with a lowercase t or TSP. We also have the 1/2 of a teaspoon, a 1 teaspoon, and then the big spoon that you see is the tablespoon. It is denoted by a capital T or TBL on your recipe cards. Make sure you look closely. If it calls for 1 teaspoon of salt and you put 1 tablespoon of salt in, it will be a ruined cookie. So make sure that you do get the correct T when you're doing that. All right. As we are making things, it is also important to know terminology and what type of utensil you use. If you are going to stir something, oftentimes you will stir things that are dry, you'll stir them together just to blend them so that they're mixed together. You might use a rubber spatula, you could use a wooden spoon, or you could use a metal spatula. And that just is for mixing, very quickly. In our recipe, we're going to be making peanut blossom cookies. And just to show you just the basics of it, we won't take it all the way through to the end, but in that you are going to see the word to beat ingredients together. And when you do that, you will use an electric mixer. Okay, so it is electric. When you see cream or you see beat, that has to be with electricity, because if you did it by hand, you would be going and going for a lot longer. So it's much easier to use the electric mixer. If we were making the peanut blossom cookies, you would start with the Hershey Kisses. You won't need those right at the very beginning, but you might want to have somebody undo the wrappers so that they're ready when the cookies are baked. The wrappers have to come off when you're making those. So the next step on your recipe is to beat the butter and the peanut butter. So when you see that, then you have to go back up into the recipe and say, well, how much of that do I need? And in our recipe, it says you need 3/4 cup of peanut butter. So I'm going to take this is actually a 3/4 cup measuring cup. If you didn't have a 3/4 cup measuring cup, you would use a 1/2 cup and a 1/4 cup to get the proper. You wouldn't want to use the 1 cup and just do a little less, because that would not be accurate. You would want to make sure that you do it properly. So we put the butter and the peanut butter. The amount of butter we need is a 1/2 cup of softened butter, not melted. It's very important when you read a recipe, you read it one ingredient at a time. It's not like a book where you read the whole thing and then just throw it all together. You have to do step by step. This is margarine or butter, and on the margarine and butter wrapper, there are little lines, tablespoons. Each line is a tablespoon. There are 8 tablespoons in a 1/2 cup. This calls for 1/2 of a cup, which is 1 stick. So 1 stick is equivalent to a 1/2 cup, or 8 tablespoons. All right, so it says we beat those 2 ingredients, and only those 2, together first. That's our first step. And you want to make sure the butter is softened, but not melted. If it's hard, you would not be able to get the mixer through it. Okay, so it should just look like peanut butter. You should not see the yellow of the margarine or the butter, whatever one you used. After that, it says to add 1/3 cup of sugar. Now, when we are doing our measurements, this is sugar. Okay? When you scoop into your sugar canister, you want to make sure that you level it off with a flat edge. You could do a metal spatula or the backside of a spoon, and make sure that it is leveled off, because if it's heaping flour, if it's heaping sugar, it's going to make the product different. These again are dry measuring cups, so we would measure dry ingredients like sugar, flour, brown sugar, and that type of thing. So we're going to add that brown sugar, white sugar, brown sugar. When you're measuring brown sugar, you pack it down, and the amount of brown sugar we need is a 1/2 cup, and I've got that pre-measured. This is my 1/2 cup. Put that in there, and we add those, and we return to beat those together. Some recipes will have you cream the sugar and the shortening. Since this has peanut butter and butter, that's why they had you beat those 2 things together. Then we would add the egg, and the amount of eggs is 1 egg. 1 large egg is standard. If you see egg, it wants you to use large eggs, not medium or not jumbo. Okay? And then it says to add, after the egg, the milk and the vanilla. It calls for 2 tablespoons of milk. So we go to our tablespoon. I would measure it over a different bowl, so in case you spill too much, you haven't ruined the recipe. 1, 2, and the amount of vanilla that we need is 1 teaspoon. Now I have to go back to the other spoons, make sure you aren't using the tablespoon, and we add 1 teaspoon. And measure over something else. Okay, we go back and beat that together. Okay, now it says to stir. When you see the word stir, this is not stir. Okay, stir is a wooden spoon or a spatula so that you can do it by hand. The amount of flour we need is 1 1/3 cup. So I scooped in, and you level off. That's the 1 cup. I've pre-measured the other 1/3. It also calls for baking soda, 1 teaspoon of baking soda. I'm going to use another set because my vanilla was wet, so I don't want that to get back in my soda. Level that off. And I need salt. The amount of salt I need, salt makes it just to flavor it a little bit and so that they don't over rise. And the amount of salt I need is 1/4 of a teaspoon, so make sure you pay very close attention. That's not very much. You wouldn't want to get the teaspoon out and do the teaspoon because they would be very salty. Okay, we add that. And now we stir. Move over to use my spatula so I can scrape along the sides of the bowl. When you make cookies, you want to make sure that you get all the dry ingredients gathered up so you don't have chunks of flour left, that everything is blended. And when you're making the peanut blossom cookies, it looks similar to a peanut butter cookie, but we're going to roll it in some sugar, bake it, and then after it is baked and warm coming out of the oven, then you would place a Hershey Kiss that is unwrapped into the cookies, and then it will flatten it out. So we'll take a cookie sheet, and you would take it. I like using cookie scoops, but you could use the tablespoon or teaspoon, and you'll make a scoop of cookie. Okay, have a little bit of sugar. I've just got a little bit of sugar in a measuring cup. Roll it in a ball. And roll those cookies so that you have balls of cookies that are wrapped up and rolled in sugar. We would bake these for 10 minutes, and when they come out of the oven, then you will take the unwrapped Hershey Kiss and press them in and smash them down, and they're ready to eat. So enjoy your cookie baking.